Welcome to Season 3 of the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the bi-weekly show that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada. Our three co-hosts include Ryan Stinn, holder of the highest equipped total in Canada, as well as owner of Unparalleled Training Centre in Moose Jaw, and co-owner of Inner Strength Products, Steve Cassioli, IPF world record holder and medalist, third strongest Canadian classic powerlifter of all time, and owner of Cassioli Strength and Conditioning. Lastly, Avi Silverberg, world bench press medalist, national team coach, and co-owner of MyStrengthBook.com. Today's episode starts right now.
This season of the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast is brought to you by MyStrengthBook.com. MyStrengthBook is a web-based platform for powerlifters to build workouts, plan training programs, and assess training metrics that lead to better performance on the platform. Tracking and analyzing training metrics allow you to uncover key trends and insights on what works for you and the precise variables that lead to greater success. Say goodbye to pen and paper tracking and hard-to-use spreadsheets. Say hello to MyStrengthBook. Sign up now for a free trial at www.mystrengthbook.com.
Hello and welcome back to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast. We are on Season 3 and it's been about a month since we've podcasted and we are excited to be back in the podcasting seats. We've had a little bit of a break mostly because I moved to Chile in between the last episode and this episode, including my laptop getting stolen and not having the ability to podcast and life just being a little bit crazy for everybody. But we're going to get everybody up to date with what we're doing. But the topic for this week's podcast is competition prep. So we actually want to discuss around how you prep for competition and how you manipulate your training leading up to the meets. How to use RPE as a tool for managing those last couple of weeks of training and actually peaking for the meet, and possibly how to select attempts based on what's happening in training the last few weeks. So very relevant topic because a lot of us in Canada are training for either the Arnold's, which is coming up next weekend, Steve being one of those competitors, and also the CPP National Championships, which is 2 weeks away. And so very relevant topic given that most of us will be competing in the next couple of weeks. So let's dive in and just talk a little bit about updates. Steve, I mentioned that you are training for the Arnold's. How's that going? Tell us some relevant training numbers that you're doing. And
everything right now is going really well. I'm about 5 days out as of today, the 27th. But leading up to it, I've had my hip was bugging me actually for the past 2 months or so. Nothing crazy, but just irritation, and I've been dealing with that. And it's weird because I can get through all my training fine, but it's just afterwards, the day after, 2 days after, I still can feel it. But with recovery, it seems to be in the reduced volume leading up to the meet, it seems to be healing up well. So I'm happy about that, and training is right where it needs to be right now. I hit my heaviest squat, bench, and deadlift last week. Squat being 235 kilos, 10 kilos under my best. Bench, I hit 147.5, 7.5 kilos under my best. And then for deadlift, I pulled 250, 5 kilos under my best about 5 days ago. So, I feel like I'm on track for some PRs, and hopefully on the day I'm there and ready. But I'm pretty jacked up for it. I've never been to the Arnold before, and heard great things.
Yeah, and so we're actually going to talk about in this episode how you actually time those last heavy lifts leading into a competition, and what we should be doing, and what are sort of the best practices, and some of the potential exceptions to those best practices. So we'll get into that a little bit more. But first time going to the Arnold's. You compete on Saturday, so are you going to be spending a ton of time in the expo, getting all the free supplements, or are you going to be relaxing?
I'm a supplement king. No, I'm just kidding. I don't take any supplements anymore, to be honest. I used to when I was in high school. Those are the high school days, But like you and Ryan were saying, it's best to, kind of stay out of that scene. If you like that scene and it's you can handle all the big crowds, that's good. But mean, it can be very like stressful being there before a competition. So, I mean, I'll probably like check it out the first day I get there, but then, just kind of just try to relax the day before and kind of get my mindset.
I actually find like even, the Arnold's aside, and that huge expo that it is, I actually find that just being in that meet environment before I compete to be quite exhausting, because you're just sort of getting wrapped up into the storylines and the emotions of other people competing, maybe your friends or things like that. And you get tired just by being in there. So I actually like to just hang out in my hotel room and not spend a ton of time before I compete, hanging out at the actual venue. Ryan, tell us about what's going on in your realm. I know that you're training for nationals and you're doing equipped and things are looking pretty good. What else is new?
Well, not too much. It's a pretty low-key meet. I'm not trying to peak too hard for it. I want to be able to come back and start training pretty quick, pretty heavy. So, yeah, I just hit my heaviest squat and bench. I'll probably do one more of each, but I'll probably do a heavier squat this week, I guess, and then one more bench day on this coming weekend, and then be all wrapped up. My deadlift is down. I'm letting sumo take a rest. I'm just going to pull conventional, which I really am not good at. So, kind of trying new things, and I've always kind of avoided conventional because I suck at it. So I use it as an accessory movement, but I haven't competed conventionally since like 2007 or something. So it's be about the first time in 10 years since I pulled conventional in a meet. So we'll see how it goes.
Why are you making that switch?
I'm just doing it I've been trying to heal up my right glute, hip, hamstring stuff. Been really angry. It's been going for almost 2 years now. Actually, 2 years now. It started before nationals in 2015, and I kind of ignored it, and it bugged me a little bit now and then, and eventually it just got so bad that I couldn't ignore it anymore. Stupidly, you always think that a tweak is going to go away until it doesn't, and then suddenly it's been a year or 2 years and you can't fix it anymore. So I'm trying to take the time off to rest and recover the hamstring adductor. That seems to be the root of the issue. So I'm just pulling conventional to give it a bit of a rest. And I'm also pulling hook grip, which is kind of new to me as well. But and conventional hook grip is even more exploratory. So it's been good. But overall, training's been going well. I changed to flats in my squat, which is, a new thing as well. And I've been liking it. It's definitely different though. It was a struggle to get used to hitting depth. Well, in general, hitting depth, because, everyone knows that I'm not good at hitting depth in training. And then to switch to the flats was an added change. So it's been fun to kind of experiment and stuff.
I think the key takeaways is just find something that you can physically do and work around your injuries, but still get in there and do the work. I mean, I know that tons of people have said that, either switching stances in deadlift, you can allow you to work around an injury, but, I can think of an athlete right now that can't squat but can leg press, and there's no pain there. So it's like, well, we're going to be leg pressing for the next 2 weeks, right? So I think it's just important to find something that you can actually do and do it, and not get too discouraged about how you're not able to do your competition style. One other thing, Ryan, that I don't think we've talked on the podcast since we've sort of resumed the schedule is you to the World Games. Tell us a little bit about the World Games and how you actually got that invite, and were you expecting it? Was it a surprise, and how you feel about all that?
Yeah, it was a big surprise to get invited to that. Just to start at the top, the World Games is a multi-sport event that's held every 4 years. It takes place all over the world. So in 2009, it was in Taiwan, and Rhea Stin, my wife, and Tom Keane lifted from Canada. And then in 2013, it was held in Cali, Colombia, and Rhea again lifted. So both those times in the past, I've gone as a coach. In 2009, Jeff Butt came along, and in 2013, Ryan Fowler came along. We kind of expected, I don't want to say expected, but hoped that Ray would get another spot this year. Adam Ramsey had secured his spot by placing at Worlds. That's the only way to secure a spot in the World Games is to get top 3 at Worlds, the Equipped Worlds, I guess. I should make sure people know this is an equipped event. So Adam got podium at Worlds, so he was able to secure a spot at the World Games. Rhea, I think, got 4th at Worlds, so wasn't guaranteed a spot. Now, 72 kilo class for women is a little bit different. In the World Games, weight classes are combined into lightweight, medium weight, heavyweight, and super heavyweight. For the men, that works out nicely because there's 8 weight classes, so there's 2 weight classes in every combined weight class. For women, though, there's only 7 weight classes, so 72 kilos is the anomaly that goes by itself as a heavyweight class. So Rhea got a spot from, I want to say she got a Wilkes spot from Worlds. No, she might have got the North American wildcard spot. So the other way to get a spot is to get a wildcard spot from a regionals. So knowing this, we of course competed at the North Americans this past year. Myself, I think I got like 3rd or 4th, maybe even like 5th or 6th best Wilkes there. So I really didn't expect to get a spot. But what ended up happening was people who'd got spots above me. So Blaine Sumner had the best Wilkes North Americans. He got a spot from podium at Worlds. Adam Ramsey had a better Wilkes than me at North Americans, and he got a spot from podium at Worlds. And then the other rule is that any combined weight class can only have 2 from a country. So because Blaine Sumner and Joe Capilano podiumed at Worlds, they got the 2 USA spots at the super heavyweight class, which is the 120, 120 plus. So North American, Steve Mann, another USA lifter, had out Wilkesed me, but he couldn't take a spot because there's already 2 USA lifters in the 120 class, or the super heavyweight class. And then another lifter, Eric Casabuska, I probably said that wrong, but Eric also out Wilkesed me in the 93 kilo class. But because of Worlds, Ian Bell and Charlie Connors in 105 and 93 took podium spots. They took the 2 USA spots in the heavyweight class. So somehow, through this magical formula of all these other lifters placing and getting spots, I was able to get the North American wildcard spot. So it was a very big surprise when I got the email. It is, I mean, to me, it's the highest level, the highest honor to compete at a World Games. So I'm very excited, and that's why I'm not taking nationals super seriously. It's just kind of a tune-up, a prep, and then training will start right away for that, which takes place. I think it's June 23rd, 4th, 5th. I think we compete in Poland, or July. Sorry, July.
In July. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it is probably the highest honor that we have in powerlifting, given that it's every 4 years. There's such a rigorous sort of application and selection process, as you sort of detailed, which seems like it's relying on so many other just so many factors, right? You can only send a certain number per country. You have to, medal, or you can get wild card spots based on Wilkes at regional events. It's all very sort of challenging to actually earn a spot, and not many Canadians, as you've said, have earned those spots. So awesome accomplishment, and obviously we're all proud of you and look forward to hearing how the training's going for that. So turning the spotlight on myself for a second, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, one of the reasons why we haven't podcasted in a little bit has been because I've moved to Chile, and that's something that I've been putting out there on social media, saying that I'm coming down here for the next 6 months, and I'm down here on part of it was part of a grant that I applied for, and we were successful in getting it to help support my strength book. So I'm down here with some other tech-minded companies, all who have received the grant to help grow their business a little bit. And it's not only the money that we receive, we get a lot of sort of mentorship and networks and things like that. And for those who don't know why Chile and why Santiago, it's sort of considered the startup technology hub of Latin America. It's kind of because it's very similar to Silicon Valley in the sense that there's lots of tech people that come here and try to grow their businesses. So very exciting. I've only been part of the program now for 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks I was busy sort of trying to find a place and, just trying to get my, bearings and things like that. And as I said, my laptop got stolen. So that was kind of an eye opener to just life in South America, but managed to get a new laptop and we're back to podcasting now. So super excited that we can We're super excited to continue to produce the podcast content, obviously, but all of this moving and traveling and has created a situation where it's been very challenging for myself to train for nationals. Give you a quick example. I recently, I joined a gym, which is sort of the best sort of gym in the city. It still doesn't have everything you sort of need to powerlift, but it'll get the job done. But anyways, I randomly went to the gym on a Saturday to go do a bench workout, and there's only one bench basically taken out. I don't even know where the bench, took the bench out of the gym. So I had to do another workout. I just randomly ended up doing a shoulder work because there was nothing else that I could do in the gym. So I'm just trying not to get weak at this moment in time.
They probably saw you. They probably saw you benching 4 plates, and everyone else was probably staring at you super awkwardly, and they're like, "Who is this guy? We're gonna take out this bench."
Well, the first day we were in the gym, we actually we started benching, and we both were benching 4 plates, and that was all of the 45-pound plates in the gym. So
exactly, you guys were
even if I wanted to bench more, there's no opportunity to do so. So I'll have to focus on just benching 400 for the next little bit.
Just ever increasing reps.
So why don't we roll into the topics for this week? We're going to be talking about competition prep here, and obviously a lot of us are prepping for nationals. So Steve, you already talked about some of the heavy lifts that you did leading up to the Arnolds, and Ryan, you talked about some of the heavier lifts that you're just did and going to do this upcoming week for nationals. So why don't we talk about that? What's the heaviest you'll do leading up to a competition, and perhaps give us the exact percentages that you'll do. Want to start us off?
Sure. I don't know if that was directed to me because we kind of lost a name there, but I'll start us off. So for me, and I'll speak on the equip side because that's what I'm kind of doing right now. And things change a little bit with raw. I tend to go a little heavier, a little closer, but I'll do my last heavy squat about 14 days out from competition, which will be this Friday, which is when I'm planning to do my last heavy squat. I'm going to aim for about 370 kilos, which is, it's a pretty high percentage, but only because I think I haven't hit a third attempt for a while. So I think my max is actually a little higher than what I'm basing it off right now. So I want to say it's about 93%.
So to be clear, Ryan, this is 93% of your theoretical max?
No, it's 93% of my actual, I've hit it max. But it's probably about 91% of what I think my max is going to be. My rule is I don't usually take more than an opener in training, especially equipped. It's just a little too stressful. If I do, it'll only be, halfway between an opener and a second. I usually wouldn't get anywhere near a second attempt in training, at least not a planned second attempt. It might end up being a second attempt in the meet, but my planned second attempt would be higher than what I would do in training. And that'll be the same for bench. I don't usually go heavier than an opener. I might do some overloads on like a 2 board after I do some stuff to my chest in the shirt, but I won't go to my chest with more than about an opener. And deadlift, I'm kind of the same way. Further out with deadlift, I'll go heavier. But again, it usually wouldn't be more up to a second attempt. It would probably be maybe 5 or 10 kilos less than a second attempt. And so deadlift, I usually aim for my last heavy or my heaviest deadlift, like 17 days out, but I'll go as close as like 14 days if I have to. I just prefer a little longer recovery from those. And then bench, it's usually about 8 to 10 days out. I'll do my last heavy bench.
All the percentages. So you already mentioned the percentages for squat, around 93% of your actual max. And so is that sort of the same for bench and deadlift, like exact percentages? You're trying to get up to around that 93% mark?
Yeah, in the 91 to 93 for squat and bench, and then deadlift is usually a little lower, maybe 89 to 90%.
And I think this is sort of a common way to act in terms of actual distance away from a competition. Like your deadlift, you're taking your heavier deadlifts maybe further away from the competition, and then squats sort of that middle ground, whereas bench you can sort of do a little bit closer to a meet. To me, those numbers or those days away from a competition for equipped are maybe just further away. So maybe let's turn it over to Steve. Steve, are you doing your heavier attempts a little bit closer to the meet because it's raw, or how would you actually structure that?
Yeah, my my heavier attempts are definitely a little bit closer to the meet. So generally what I do is for all 3 lifts, my the heaviest I'll go is generally between 93 and 95% before a competition. For my squat, I'll take my last heavy squat 7-8 days out, generally, just depending on when it lands and kind of like how I structured my training block. 7 or 8 days out, so 93 to 95%, and that being probably just under like a second attempt, a few kilo, 2.5 kilos under a second attempt. For bench, exactly the same, 93 to 95, a couple kilos under a second attempt. The only thing for benches, though, I do a little bit of like two board overload training, which that I might take something a little bit heavier, closer to my max. But again, moving really well. Like my lockout is better than my speed off the chest. I just like to handle that heavier weight just for some confidence for the bench, and I'll do that again like 7 days out, handling that heavier stuff. And then for deadlift, generally take my last deadlift about, again, 9 to 11 days out, and that being just under a second attempt. This block I've pushed my deadlift a little bit more, and I wanted to try to handle some heavier loads and see how that translates on the platform, but it's feeling good.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's sort of the same structure as Ryan, and I would sort of agree with that. One of the things I'm thinking as I'm hearing you guys talk is that you're using sort of exact percentages off your rep maximums, and I know that some people who I've just talked with generally have said, okay, I want to compete in 4 months or 6 months, and I want to hit these numbers. So they already sort of project themselves into that competition, and they say, okay, like these are the numbers I want to hit, and then they sort of work their way back. And they don't necessarily look at percentages in the same way. They sort of take percentages off of like an estimated or what they want to hit. Do you guys see any sort of benefits or sort of pros or cons of doing that, Ryan?
So I've done similar things to that. Mostly what I'll do, or when I do that, it's a lot of it is almost a head game thing, right? So in 2015, when I was gunning for my 1,000 kilo total, I knew I needed to squat about 390 at the meet. So I said, okay, my goal is 390. But what I did with that was I said, okay, then I need to open at 370. So then I had a goal opener. It wasn't necessarily that 390 was my goal, but I knew I needed to open about 370 if I was going to get there. So that just made me know that when I was putting my squat suit on, I wanted to be hitting somewhere around 370 every time I could, or as many times as I could. So I was really comfortable with that opener, knowing that as long as my opener's fast, I know that my goal is realistic, right? So I don't use it for percentages so much as just a mental training sort of thing, just the confidence that, I've told myself this is the number I'm going to hit, and I'm going to use it as, so I don't get it stuck in a rut of saying, 380 is heavy, so I shouldn't.
I think I think even more for like an elite athlete, like, you're a little bit closer to your potential, and it's sort of like long term, like over the course of 4 and 6 months in your training cycle, happen in that 4 to 6 month period that might affect that end game. So I think if you were to structure your program based on these sort of numbers that you desire, and you work your way back, I think it almost makes the plan a little bit too rigid, in the sense that, like, so much can happen between now and that point that doesn't sort of let you accommodate for those things that come up. I've just seen some potential issues in structuring that way. The further that you plan into the future, the more flexible it has to be. I don't know if you agree, but Steve, maybe you want to.
I definitely agree on that. I mean, like, I have done in the past when I started out, you'd have these goals that you want to hit, and like these numbers that you base it off of. And I find that as you're starting out, it's a lot more like realistic or manageable. But then, like, as of like now, if I try to say, okay, I'm gonna go like 5 kilos above my squat, base my number off that, 5 kilos above my bench, and then 5 kilos above my deadlift. And then, I mean, especially if you're doing like percentages too, you might get to a spot where like, you're obviously hitting these like PR sets and rep schemes. And I mean, like, sometimes, like, I mean, depending where you are on the block, they can probably get like pretty ugly, and they're going to be pretty heavy, right? So I think unless you're kind of like intermediate lifter, it's going to be really hard to, set these like massive numbers and base them off percentages. And I think that's just how just like people get injured. I think it's just better off just, keeping keeping your current like numbers, basing your percentages, RPs off those current numbers. And obviously if your 85% is, for me, for example, is whatever, 210 for a squat, and you're hitting it for, I don't know, 4 sets of 4 at RP 8. So you clearly have 2 reps left in the tank. Then it's like, okay, you're getting stronger, your technique's good. So I don't see, that's how I base mine off. If everything's moving well, and I mean, my RPEs are on track for PRs, and it's kind of like, I don't see the point of having that big number in your head.
So Steve, just correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you've been tracking on my strength book for the last 4 months leading up to the Arnolds, and I know that you showed me like your plan leading up, you like 4 months ago all the way up to the Arnolds in terms of like some of your metrics. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like you set up this long-term plan so you could sort of see this, visual analysis of your training. But is it not the case that after every block of training, so after every month, you would sort of go back in and you would sort of tweak numbers based on how that last block went?
No, so definitely. So I planned it out like months and months in advance. So like the further away, I'll like be a lot more like unspecific. And then as I'm getting closer, getting a little bit more specific. But yeah, definitely down the way, like I found that, for example, like an exception, like a high bar would be like aggravating my like ankles or hips. And then I'd be like, okay, obviously I'm going to take those out. So, I mean, obviously going to have those times you have to manipulate a few things. Yeah. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So just like one more thing. So like, I know like obviously like sometimes like training's going like really, really well. And you want to just like, okay, I've had a lot of people or clients just saying it's like almost too easy, and it's just like, you kind of have to like trust that process. And if you're like far or like away from a competition, like things should be like, I don't know, relatively smooth and easy. Like obviously you're going to be still getting that training effect from like other variables, but I mean, you shouldn't be like, I don't know, I shouldn't be like grinding stuff out. That's just my opinion.
Well, to that point, like, I had a conversation yesterday with a guy. I won't name any names, but he's a really good deadlifter and squatter. He was benching yesterday at our Saskatchewan training camp, and he kept failing. He's like, I'll probably do like 4 or 5 reps, but he's failing at 4 or 5 reps. And I'm like, do you always train to failure? He's like, oh, I never fail in squat or deadlift, but in bench I do. I said, well, what's your weakest lift? He goes, bench. I said, maybe there's a correlation there. Like, I think it's more important to be hitting not easy, but really solid, comfortable, challenging work sets that look nice.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about that before, about just quality of movement. I want to go back to singles for a second and ask you guys a question. When would you start your heavy singles in your training cycle? Do you not do singles in your training cycle? I guess I shouldn't assume that we all do singles leading up to a competition prep, but most of us would probably do so, and most of us would probably do so at a fairly higher intensity, or maybe an RPE at around 8 or 9. Of these sorts of singles, how far away from the competition are you doing it, if you're doing them at all? The sort of frequency, Ryan.
So for me, I don't. I've done lots of different things in my time. I find that I like to do, and I won't even say they're 8 or 9 singles. They're like at 8 or at 9. They might be at 7 or 7.5 some days. I like to handle that heavier weight as long as they're easy and comfortable and technically proficient. Then I don't mind doing them pretty far out from a meet, like maybe starting at 10 weeks out, and then slowly building them up. Sorry. I think it's especially for squat. I don't do it much for bench. Bench, I tend to get my overload, my heavier weight in my hand using boards and stuff. But for squat, I definitely like to have them in, even if it's just 1 week on, 1 week off for a while. But I find it's important because for me at least, squatting is a lot about the confidence of handling the weight on your back. So if I don't have it on my back for a long period of time, then I find it hard to just take that, to jump into it really quickly. So I'd rather have it early on and slowly build that single up, not aiming for an RP 8, but maybe I'm just aiming at, an 82 or an 84% 1 week. And then the next week it's 85, 86, 87, and so on. And I might do 1 or 2 singles and then drop back down to my work sets.
Man, I absolutely love what you're saying, because, you're looking at each individual lift as slightly different, and you're sort of understanding your own preferences, that further away from the meet, it's like, I want to start my heavier squats so that nothing up to the meet is like lacking confidence. Whereas it seems like you can get confidence fairly quick on the bench press. Is that sort of accurate?
Yeah, because even further out, I'm doing board work that I'm handling heavier weights. So even if I'm not benching those heavy singles, I have the weight or more than the weight in my hands, so I'm used to it, even psychologically. Deadlift, I like to do quite a few climbing singles. So, and that'll usually start maybe 8 weeks out or 7 weeks out, and they won't be. Maybe they'll be to an opener, but not even close some weeks. So I'll just start light, do singles, working technique, and make sure the technique stays proficient. If it starts breaking down, I'll cut it off there and then drop back and do some work sets. Again, it's just getting the weight in the hands and working that technique, because I find like even throwing a belt on, like so much of my work is done beltless, and even throwing a belt on and trying to do singles can throw off the technique for a while. So it's good to get those practice when.
So let me ask you this: like, do you find that there's some sort of ideal number of lifts that you need in terms of singles for squat, bench, and deadlift? Like, let's say my preference is to do at least 10 squat singles where I'm moving, between this percentage, at a specific RPE or something, like, or do you find that like you just sort of play it by ear and just go with what your body, feels like? Or do you have some sort of actual prescription of, I want to be doing this number of singles, leading up to the meet?
Like, do you mean total combined over weeks, or?
Yeah, total combined. So let's say for the 10 weeks leading into the competition, you're going to be doing 2 singles every week leading up to the competition. So that's 20 singles. Something like that.
No, I don't have a necessary prescription for that. Like for deadlift, lots of times I'll prescribe like 6 singles, just climbing singles, and I'll do that. I'll do 6 by 1 1 week, then 5 by 1, then 4 by 1, and keep dropping it down till it gets heavy enough. Then I'll cycle back and do it again. For squats, we tend to do a lot of top end singles, so I wouldn't say there's any total number. A confidence and psychological thing. And I'm always playing around and changing things and trying different things with different athletes and seeing what works for different people. So I don't want to say there's one thing that works. Some people are much better handling significantly submaximal loads for lots higher volume, and then doing a really short peak up to their maxes. Some people are better with a really slow progressive peak where they have time to get used to the weight. So where some people might peak in 3 weeks, some people might peak over 6 or 7 weeks.
Steve, what do you say in terms of doing heavier singles? Like, are you doing them just closer to a meet or quite far away from a meet? I know this past summer, when you were like 6 months away from a meet, you were starting to play around with doing some heavier singles in your training. Is that something that you've implemented every week? And then what sort of the progression is? Is it just linear, like add more weight to the bar each week, or how do you actually plan those singles in a competition?
Yeah, so like when I was just playing around with that was just because I was in a very, very like unspecific block, and I just wanted to keep that main movement in. So I mean, just hitting that like single I didn't go heavier than like 85%, but it was just keep that competition lift in. But generally, when I'm peaking for a competition, I will start about 6 weeks out, single at 82%, and then like a 2.5 kilo climb all the way up to the meet. And then like Ryan said on his last point there, I'm like, I really like to hammer in that like sub-maximal volume, and I don't need a lot of time hitting that single. So I'll hit that single, but then I'm doing drops at least like 5% less. So, I mean, that's why I could push those singles up to like 95% leading up to comp, just because my body is like I'm reducing the volume quite a bit. And I mean, those singles make sure they're nice and smooth. They don't fatigue me as much.
Now we're all sort of people who I would say, implement a percentage-based training program. We all sort of have our sets and reps and percentages that we're hitting on a week-to-week basis. But my question is to you, and I'm actually writing a blog on this right now, so I'm curious to get your feedback. Are you using RPE as sort of a tool to manage those percentages? And if so, like in what ways? Are you hitting a percentage at like, let's say 90%, and then are you sort of speed with an RPE to determine like any sort of, that's a higher RPE than last week for the same percentage, so perhaps I'm not going to go to my planned weight next week, or that's just an example. But are you using RPE in any sort of way as a modification tool?
For myself, anyways, I do for my clients, but I don't. For my competition lifts, I never use RPEs at all. I kind of have a set number and I do it just because. I mean, I just feel like for myself, I cannot judge that like RPE. Like, yeah, when I get over 80%, everything feels heavy, and I like if it moves fine, it moves fine. But I know some of my clients, they need to handle that, handle that heavier weight, and, give them that extra little push. Because sometimes even when I get like video feedback and they're like, oh, this was like RPE 6, but like for me, I'm just like, no, that looks like RP 8. I'm like, okay, the next week I'll give them a little heavier single. We'll see if what they're perceiving is kind of relative, like, or I see the same thing as they do. I generally just prescribe RP for accessory-based movements, and I just try to keep it to the percentages. And I mean, they correlate. Some people need them just to have that value there, but I don't see any extra benefit from it.
Ryan, are you using it as a tool anyway, or let me just extend that and ask if you use it to help guide your attempt selection in any way?
No, I never think in terms of RPE. I shouldn't say that. In my own training, will I say, oh, that was an easy single, I can go heavier today? Yes. I won't say, oh, that was a 7, I can do another one. I don't necessarily use those terms. I definitely use the rate of perceived exertion, but I don't numerically grade it in my head as I'm doing things. It'll just simply be, okay, that was easy, I can go a little heavier today, or that was too hard, I should back off a little bit or do less sets, right? I use it with my clients, like Steve said, so that they rate their movements. And then when I look at their video, if I agree or disagree, I talk to them about that. And then I can use it to help increase or decrease the weights or the volume for the next week.
Just going off that point there, like I find that even when you get like a little bit heavier, and then like you're hitting a heavy, like really, really heavy single. And then like say even up to like 90%, people are hitting singles and they base their RP like 7 or 8. Right. So based off percentages and then their RP, like it just doesn't correlate, because people get pretty jacked up for like one single. And if they actually rated at 7, I guarantee they won't be able to hit an extra 2 reps. It's that they're so jacked up for that first rep, and who knows, that second rep will most likely, fall apart and turn to a 10 real quick.
I was just going to say, I recently, the Alberta Powerlifting brought up Mike Teixeira to talk about RPEs. And I think like now his sort of way of viewing RPE when it comes to singles, especially in the top percentages, is not necessarily more of an indication of how many more reps you could do, but how does it actually look in terms of your opener in a competition or a second in competition. And I actually sort of like that way of looking at it, because you can blow up an opener in competition because you're fired up and you got some adrenaline going, but could you actually do 2 more reps? Well, maybe not, right? Steve, let me ask you this, and just keep talking about competition prep, because this is something that we've all done before, but you're actually about to do this, which is sort of back-to-back competitions, like turning around from one meet and within a couple weeks or a month, doing another meet. So you have the Arnolds, and I think it's like 10 days after you're going to be competing at Nationals. So how do you plan your training cycle for this? Do you have to have one priority meet over another, or, what does your actual training look like going into those 2 competitions?
Well, so you kind of have to like prioritize like what meet you're doing, first of all. So like, I mean, for me from a while ago was the Arnold that I wanted to do. And I knew Nationals was going to be within those, like that week or 2. So yeah, I'm definitely peaking pretty hard for the Arnold. And then just coming off that, I'm definitely going to be experiencing a little bit like a fatigue and stuff. And like with that 10-day turnaround, you can't really do much. And I mean, I have like this hip thing I'm dealing with, and I want that to recover. To be honest, like I'm probably going to I'll train for maybe four of those 10 days and just keep it still relatively heavy and just try to hold on to some of those adaptions that I've made over the course of like 8 weeks. And I'm sure I'll still be able to come within like, I don't know, at least a couple kilos of those numbers or whatever I have to do to qualify. To be honest, I'm not going to be trying to set any records. I'll do what I have to qualify for Worlds. And I mean, whatever I need to do.
So for me, like when I do a time frame, like, or even just after I finish competing, the first, 5 days or 7 days after the competition, you generally feel fairly sluggish. Like, the weights at a specific percentage are feeling heavier than normal. There's a little bit of a crash after you sort of peak. How do you deal with that moving from one meet to the next? Like what I want to sort of get to understand is like, what are you exactly doing on your workouts? Like those 4 workouts that you're going to plan between the Arnold's and Nationals, like what exactly are you going to do? Like, are you going to have that first workout like super light, or are you just going to get back into heavier lifting? Like, what are you doing?
I'm going to try to keep it like relatively similar to the previous couple weeks before the Arnold there. Again, just so keeping, I mean, just like a little bit of work in, and then, but again, the average intensity is going to be a lot higher, and probably even just keeping, even like a couple heavier singles in there. I'm like, you can't, with that 10-day turnaround, you can't do too much, but you want to, again, you have to keep that intensity relatively high just because of those past few weeks. That's what you were doing. And it's really tough to maintain everything you have there with just going back to like sub maximal volume. And I mean, I'm pretty good with timing that peak accordingly. So, I mean, I probably won't be like peaked still, but I'll still be able to hit something relatively like heavy, right?
Yeah, I think you don't want to be in. I don't think you want to be doing any sort of new training phases or providing any sort of new stimulus, right? I think you got the right idea of just maybe keeping the intensity a little bit higher. Ryan, do you have any sort of suggestion there?
10 days is a pretty extreme example. I've never done such a thing. I think Steve has it right on, though. You got to try and keep intensity, pretty high, keeping volume pretty low, and just try and hold on to as much of the training you can. When I did a similar thing in 2009, going between the Arnold and Nationals, but we had a 4-week turnaround time. Side note, that's where I hurt my back in 2009. So I really hope that Steve has a better experience than I did. But so what I tried to do with that kind of turnaround time, and again, this is coming from Equipped because back then that was really all there was. I tried to keep intensity still pretty high, volume low, but try to bring speed back into it. So because I find like as you get to a meet, things get slower and slower. So what I did is I tried to incorporate a little more band work while keeping the reps low and just keep the weight low, but try and increase explosiveness for the first 2 weeks, and then try to do a quick peak for a week and then a deload for a week sort of thing. So, I thought it was working. I'm not sure it did.
So it's really exciting because we're all prepping for our meets, and certainly looking forward to Steve kicking things off here in about a week's time, going to the Arnold's, and we'll all be watching online. To finish today's episode, let's do a video feedback review. We've had some submissions through our Facebook page, and if you don't know what this is, we basically ask for athletes to submit their videos, and we'll provide a technical review for you. So we have 2 athletes who we're going to be looking at, and we'll do our best to describe sort of what the movement pattern looks like, as well as some possible cues or corrections to these movement patterns. Ryan's going to kick us off here first, and we got Blake Barrett here. What do we have, Ryan?
So quickly, I'm just going to look at Blake posted a couple of videos, but we're going to watch his bench here. So he has this video to me is super overstimulating. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's too much stuff happening. So I'm going to kind of watch bottom right corner. So the first thing that kind of comes out to me watching this is just general overall tightness. You can see him kind of reset and try and tighten between reps. So I would just work on trying to be a little globally tighter, and you can see a quite a bit of a sink into the chest on the touch. And I know it works. A lot of the bigger guys like to do the big sink, but I think when you have a little more mass, you can kind of sink and use a bit of that. I don't want to say belly power, but we'll say belly power. I'd say Blake is, maybe a 74 kilo, 83 kilo lifter here. He doesn't have that same kind of, action going on down there. So I would say a little tighter off the chest. Don't let it sink quite as much. I like to, one of the things I took away from listening to Jen Thompson was she calls them t-shirt presses or t-shirt benches, where you basically just aim to touch your t-shirt and not really actually sink into your skin at all. And I found that carried over really well for myself, actually. Was coming down and touching as lightly as possible while staying as tight as possible. It's almost like a Spoto press, I find. I think that might work well here for Blake to try and incorporate something like that. Overall, though, it's not the best angle to see like elbow positioning and stuff like that. I like to analyze elbow position and where it is in relation to the bar, but I can't quite see that from here. So generally, I'd say a good bench technique, but maybe a little tighter as he gets to the chest.
One of the cues that I like, as you cycle through reps, because you're wanting to stay tight in between reps as well, is just to hold the weight in your lats. And, you can almost do that as a drill with some lighter weights, but just really feel your lats in the bench as your arms are locked out over your chest. Because you don't want to, as the reps go on, especially if you're doing 4, 5, or 6 reps, you don't want to sort of relax at the top, because it's going to be, every time you relax and try to regain tightness at the top, you might only regain maybe 90% of that tightness. So after 5 reps, right, you're only regaining 90%. By the time you're done five reps, your tightness, because you're just not going to be able to get as tight every rep if you lose your tightness. So I do agree there that maybe a little more tightness there as well. Steve, what do you got for us? I think we got an athlete named James here submitting a squat video.
Yeah, so James AQ, his best squat is 425. Hasn't trained much in the last year. This is 405 on the 19th of February. It's like any tweaks needed, suggestions to get him to 450. So, I mean, based on this video, it's a pretty nice squat there. But just to be super picky, I say in the hole is definitely like a loss of tightness just a bit as he's coming down, popping out of the hole. And you can see like upper body kind of wiggling and shifting a little bit. So just overall tightness. And I think that was probably your heavy day, obviously, but even on like a lighter day, some tempo work, like a 3-second eccentric, 1 second pause in the hole, just focus on just overall tightness, like from like the upper to lower. And I find that if the upper body is moving a little bit too much, you might find yourself getting some like shoulder, elbow pain, and then that's going to kind of hinder your performance again for the bench. So squat looks really good. I would say just like a little bit of overall tightness in the bottom. So just slowing, maybe even on your lighter day, like I said, doing some eccentric tempo work and just pausing there in the hole and trying to maintain that tightness without any no wiggling.
I like that suggestion. Also looks like he's in a little bit of a high bar position, and not to say that high bar squatting is wrong. I mean, certainly there's lots of examples of people squatting high bar at a very elite level, but you could even also experiment with bar position, and over time you'll sort of identify what feels the best. And potentially if you bring the bar lower down on your back, you might be able to activate your glutes a little bit more, which might help tightness in the hole. So something to try there, James, as well. I think that's it, guys. So there you have it. A little bit of video feedback for those who submitted online through our Facebook page. Go search us up, Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, and just drop us a message with your videos, and we'll be looking to do these reviews every episode. In 2 weeks, we'll be in Nationals, so we'll be going to be doing some podcasting at Nationals with some guests. So be sure to come say hello if you're there at CPU Nationals, and that's it. That's it, guys. We're done.
We did it.
We did it. We finally did it.
We finally podcasted 3 different time zones in 2 different countries.
Avi's currently in a greenhouse.
Yes, I'm in a greenhouse right now. It's very pretty here. Very pretty, very beautiful. So we'll catch everybody later.
All right.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace out.
You've been listening to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada, hosted by Stephen Cassioli, Ryan Stinn, and myself, Avi Silverberg. Please follow us on Instagram and check out our website for some great free powerlifting content at www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com. If you like what you heard today, please rate our podcast on iTunes, and don't forget to listen to every other Thursday for a brand new episode.